Matt Schaff and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here to run you through the top options for the Week 9 waiver wire runs. We have a brand new running back to discuss, Jared. We've got a couple more guys from muddled backfields to go over. We have a tight end that might already have gone from forgettable to fantasy starter. And we've got 2 rookie wide receivers to talk through, of course. All of the players that we will discuss today, plus many more guys, can be found in our weekly waiver wire pickups article on DraftSharks.com. We've got options for your shallow leagues, for your average size leagues, basically 12-team leagues, deep leagues, plus one player, as always, that we highlight as a grab this guy for long-term upside. This week's pick is actually a repeat, somebody we had earlier in the season. But Jared, I think the offense that he comes from just might be more interesting now than it was not that long ago.
I think so. Are we giving this guy away here?
No, we're not giving it away here. The whole show here is a freebie, but you got to go to DraftSharks.com if you want to get more than we're going to be talking about here. So go there, read the article, find the grab this guy at the bottom. And, you know, apparently if you bug Jared enough on Twitter, you might be able to get him to just admit it to you outright. But I'm going to move on, and I'm going to go to that brand new running back who is not brand new at all. He's actually fairly old for the position. Leonard Fournette signed with the Bills this week. Jared jumps into a spot with other guys around, but also opportunity. And I would say that Buffalo signing him halfway through the season clearly points to them wanting to give him opportunity. What do you think of Leonard Fournette this week?
Yeah, I think the Bills want a 3-man backfield, which sucks for fantasy, but I think they've shown us that, right? Because they were using 3 guys, you know, James Cook, Latavius Murray, Damian Harris before Harris went down. And there hasn't been an update on Damian Harris. I mean, his injury looked pretty serious, and the Fournette signing kind of says to me that the Bills, you know, probably aren't expecting Harris back at all this year. So to me, the Fournette signing says more about Latavius Murray than James Cook. I mean, Murray's just hasn't been good this season. He's averaging 3.6 yards per carry. I think more importantly, Murray's converted just 2 of his 8 carries inside the 5-yard line into touchdowns. You know, that's kind of where they've wanted to use Murray, kind of what they want him for that short yardage stuff. And he just hasn't been good at it. So I think they're hoping Fournette can do more of that. So I think Latavius Murray's role is in trouble. I think, you know, within the next few weeks, we'll see Fournette playing ahead of Latavius Murray. And then we'll see about James Cook. I don't think Fournette is going to steal much from James Cook. And of course, Cook has been underwhelming, you know, based on where you drafted him. If you drafted him as a mid-range 2, he's really been more of a running back 3. And I think that's going to continue to be the case going forward.
Yeah, I think at the least, this signing tells us that the Bills hope Leonard Fournette is an upgrade over Latavius Murray and Damian Harris, you know, if Damian Harris is able to get healthy from that neck injury. I think the reason to potentially be more interested in Leonard Fournette, if you have a need at running back or even just a spot to stash somebody with some upside, is James Cook has been just okay, and his usage has been just okay. It hasn't been anything consistent. It's not like it's sorted out where they're clearly using James Cook in this area. They clearly want somebody else for this spot. They've been like fiddling with it all year long. And it's an offense that really doesn't like running backs in general. It's kind of just something that they have to use. James Cook is averaging the 26th most PPR points per game among running backs right now. He's just 28th among all running backs in opportunity share, according to our historical stats pages. That's adjusted for games played. So I think Leonard Fournette comes in behind James Cook, but I think there's also a chance that he pulls even with them, has games that are better than James Cook at times. So I think how much to bid on Leonard Fournette this week really depends. If you are good at running back, I just put a cursory bid on him because he very well might be nothing the rest of the way. If you have a need, if you have a shaky group right now, I might even go a little bit beyond what we have as the recommendation in the article.
So with James Cook, I think he's been underwhelming because of the usage. If you look at his actual production, I mean, he's averaging 4.8 yards per carry. He's caught 82% of his targets. He's averaging 10.7 yards per catch. So he's been efficient in the role they're using him. And I think this is kind of the role we were expecting Cook in since the summer, right? Because he's never been like a feature workhorse back. So again, I don't think his role is going to change much. Like with Cook is just a hold for me. I don't think you want to trade him right now because his value probably is deflated with the Fournette news. So I think Cook is a hold. I think Fournette, I think he's probably going to need an injury to, I mean, at least like Latavius Murray. So if he takes all of that secondary work to be a real fantasy factor. If James Cook went down, then I think Fournette probably would step in as the Bills' primary back. So I think that's why you add him. I think if you're hoping for like standalone value, that the case for him would be that, again, he probably is going to emerge as the goal line back, and he's probably going to do some stuff in the passing game because he's been a good pass catching back throughout his career. And we know in fantasy, the touches we want from our running backs are those touches near the goal line and touches in the passing game. And I think Fournette has a chance to, be a factor in both of those departments.
Yeah, obviously the two biggest marks in his favor are it's a good offense, so anybody has a better chance to score in Buffalo than they would in most other places. And at this point in the season, you're not finding a whole lot of good options on waivers, so you're looking for somebody with some kind of path, that is like some kind of story that you can tell yourself, getting them to value. I think we can definitely agree that you don't want to overbid on Leonard Fournette this week because it's quite possible he doesn't actually help you the rest of the way. Devin Singletary and the Houston Texans came off the bye this past week, and they split the backfield work once again evenly between him and Dameon Pierce. So, Jared, it looks to me like Devin Singletary is a mild factor going forward in a decent offense. And really, his inclusion here is not about anything changing. It's more so that he just shouldn't be as available as he is now. 20% rostered in Yahoo leagues as of this week, just 27% rostered in sleeper redraft leagues as of this morning.
Yeah, I couldn't believe when I looked at that. It's like people don't want to believe that Devin Singletary is a thing again, but he definitely is. We talked about, heading into the bye week, Houston basically split work down the middle. D'Amico Ryan said after that game that he kind of wants to continue doing that. And then they come out of the bye week and, it's pretty much an even split right down the middle. Dameon Pierce saw like a snap or two more than Devin Singletary. The issue here and the reason why like Singletary should be owned and like he's probably going to be like an RB3 in our rankings most weeks going forward. So like there's some value there. Pierce is not going away. Mike Boone continues to be involved. Like, Mike Boone ran as many pass routes as Devin Singletary. Mike Boone is the guy they're using in like obvious passing situations, 2-minute drill, all that type of stuff. So, I mean, it is actually a 3-man committee in what's been an ineffective running game all season. So like, don't get excited about Singletary, but with the way the running back landscape is right now, like again, he's going to be usable most weeks going forward.
And of course, as is always the case at running back, he's a Dameon Pierce injury away from quite a bit more work.
Yeah.
One more running back to talk about here, and it's Royce Freeman, who's somebody we've talked about previously on this particular show. Jared, tell me why Royce Freeman might have at least an argument for taking more work away from Darrell Henderson.
Yeah, because Royce Freeman's just like very, very surprisingly been good these last 2 weeks. And it's just 2 weeks, and he had been bad for a couple of years, prior to these last 2 weeks. So, we'll kind of see. I'm not totally buying into it. But I mean, Freeman is beating Henderson pretty easily in yards after contact per attempt, missed tackles forced per attempt, and PFF rushing grade over the last 2 weeks. Now, actually, league wide, Freeman among 49 running backs that have 10 plus carries over the last 2 weeks, he ranks 4th among those 49 in PFF rushing grade. He ranks 6th among those 49 in yards after contact per attempt. We did see Freeman last week actually out-snap Darrell Henderson 33-29. Freeman actually ran more routes than Darrell Henderson. I know Henderson still, was the one that got the targets, but it was also Freeman that got the touchdown. So does it matter with Matt Stafford out? I think at least this week, and then we'll see beyond that. Like, again, like this isn't a backfield I think you're really going to want to invest in if you can help it, as long as it's, Brett Rypien or John Walford under center for the Rams. But I do think going forward, we should have Royce Freeman and Darrell Henderson, ranked in the same area.
Yeah, and I mean, it matters because there are at least 48 running backs, on a roster in most 12-team leagues and probably most 10-team leagues as well. So Royce Freeman is in that group of guys that should be rostered. And I think that it's a positive situation overall for at least opportunity. Darrell Henderson, for what it's worth, through 2 games with the team, leads all running backs in opportunity share, according to our historical stats page. That, I think, speaks more to the situation than it does to him. It's just how much the Rams are giving to their running backs. They were giving huge touch counts to Kyren Williams. That's why he went from not being drafted in most leagues to a top 10 running back, to a guy that people are scared to get rid of at this point. There are just lots of opportunities available behind an O-line that's been performing better than we expected. And they're certainly not going to go pass leaning with Brett Rypien in place of Matthew Stafford. So there should be opportunities. And in many cases, that's all we're looking for, is a guy who will get some opportunities, can fall into the end zone once. So Royce Freeman is somebody that you can stash. Now that we've talked through these 3 running backs, if you need one this week, and maybe it's different if you need a week 9 starter versus long-term upside, how would you sort Royce Freeman, Leonard Fournette, and Devin Singletary on waivers?
I mean, for this week, Fournette's easily 3rd, right? I mean, we don't even know if he's going to play yet. And if he does, I think you would not want to use him. I would probably lean Singletary ahead of Freeman. I think they're volume projections are going to be pretty similar. I just trust Singletary's offense to, be, quite a bit more productive than the Rams are going to be, assuming Matt Stafford is out, which I think is the safe assumption at this point.
I agree. Singletary would be my top choice for week 9. It would also be my top choice for the rest of the season because, like we said, he's got a shorter path to usability than Leonard Fournette. He's already splitting the backfield with Dameon Pierce. He's a Dameon Pierce injury away from leading that backfield. So we don't know for sure what Leonard Fournette's role is yet. The only thing we really like about him is that he's with the Bills. Going away from running back now, Trey McBride, Jared. A week ago, we loved the opportunity presented by Zach Ertz landing on IR. The Cardinals entered week 8 with the fifth most tight end receptions, fourth most tight end targets. And we were wondering whether Trey McBride would take all of it, and he took all of it plus some in his first start, led all tight ends with 14 targets against the Ravens. That tied for the lead across positions in the league. 10 catches, 95 yards, 1 touchdown to lead all tight ends in fantasy scoring. Jared, I don't think it's too early to call Trey McBride a weekly starter at the position going forward.
No, me either. I mean, I think we're witnessing a breakout, honestly. So even thinking beyond the season, I think McBride is a super exciting guy in Dynasty. McBride averaged 91 yards per game over his final 2 college seasons. That included going over 1,000 yards in 2021, his senior year. He won the Mackey Award that year as the top tight end in the nation, was a 2nd-round pick. Was really disappointing last year, but we've seen a ton of tight ends, underwhelm as rookies and then kind of, figure it out in year 2 or year 3. So super exciting for McBride, both, shorter term and long term. He was 3rd among all tight ends in Pro Football Focus receiving grade last week. It was David Njoku 1, George Kittle 2, Trey McBride 3. 84% of the pass routes for McBride. So the usage was, all you could ask for. I mean, it was elite, top 5 level tight end usage. I think the Cardinals offense for now caps the upside a little, but if they get Kyler Murray back, which I think we're expecting to happen in week 10, and the offense kind of gets going a little bit. I mean, I think McBride, I think he already is a weekly tight end 1. And I think, there's a chance he becomes like a, top 7-8 option.
And it might cap the ultimate ceiling, but it also helps them because the offense is bad enough that they're going to be trailing in a lot of games, and there just aren't that many options. There's Marquise Brown, and then there's this tall guy over the middle that I can throw it to that has a little bit more run after the catch ability than Zach Ertz does.
In Ertzian fashion, I will say 6 of McBride's catches and the touchdown came in the 4th quarter when the game was pretty much decided. And that's kind of what Ertz had been doing when he had some nice games. But I mean, I think like you're saying, the Cardinals are going to be playing from behind plenty this season. You can kind of sort of at least, count on some of that garbage time production continuing.
Call him the garbage men, baby. And if you're like 1 week and we're calling him a weekly starter, Cole Kmet is tight end 5 in PPR points per game. Jonnu Smith is tight end 11. Dalton Schultz is tight end 12. Evan Ingram's tight end 7. He has no touchdowns yet this season, so it's just not a good position. Tough matchup this week for Trey McBride and the Cardinals against Cleveland. But hey, Baltimore was also a tough matchup last week. Worked out just fine. You can check our strength of schedule pages for tight end and any other position to see those numbers, to see who has the best and worst matchups this week, including all the IDP positions. And then I think, Jared, the last remaining question for McBride, we'll see what happens when Zach Ertz comes back. But if we get 4 good weeks, like 4 well-played weeks, doesn't even have to be strong fantasy outings from Trey McBride, I don't see why the team would then be like, all right, that was fun. Now let's go back to the 34-year-old guy who can barely run.
Yeah, I sure hope not. And we don't even know for sure that Ertz will be ready to return when he's first eligible. We just know he's out at least 3 more games.
We also know that Kendrick Bourne will miss the rest of the season, and that presents opportunity to Patriots rookie wideout Demario Douglas. Jared, how much do you like Demario Douglas? How worthwhile do you think he might be the rest of 2023?
I'm kind of considering him a borderline wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 for now. That's kind of what Kendrick Bourne had settled into. He'd been a bit more productive than that even over the past few weeks, but I think usage wise, he was like a wide receiver 4. So yeah, like you said, Bourne out for the year. Devontae Parker suffered a concussion last week. They'll probably keep him out at least this coming week. Juju Smith-Schuster continues to be very bad. So there is opportunity for Demario Douglas. He actually already led the Patriots last week in both pass routes and targets. And what's exciting for me, I mean, well, first of all, Douglas was a guy who flashed and was, buzzing this summer, right? So there's reason to believe he's a pretty good player, and the Patriots like this guy, maybe better than the draft capital he got. But then Douglas also leads the entire Patriots team this season with a target on 24% of his pass routes. So he's been getting looks when he's been out there. Being out there has been his issue for most of the season. But based on what we saw last week and based on these injuries in the Patriots wide receiver core, I think Douglas is going to be, something close to a full-time player, at least this coming week. And he gets Washington this week, who is dead last in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So, with 4 teams on bye this week, I think, Douglas, in deeper, especially I think PPR leagues, is definitely someone, if you're hurting at the position, to grab and potentially use this week.
Great spot to do something this week. I think he's the most interesting Patriots receiver the rest of the way, but don't forget the Patriots part of that. This has been an awful pass offense. It's quite possible that we just don't get anybody that's truly useful from this pass offense going forward. I think it's fair to expect Demario Douglas to be maybe a less efficient version of what Kendrick Bourne has been so far this year. And, Kendrick Bourne's no stud, but 67.5% career catch rate. He's got 8.7 career yards per target, which among 128 wideouts with at least 100 targets that are active right now, that ties for 30th. So, not amazing, but he's also not a slouch in terms of efficiency. So good role, good opportunity. Demario Douglas will be interesting going forward, worth rostering, and we'll see if he can be usable. Quentin Johnston has not been usable, but maybe we saw him start to turn the corner on that front Sunday night. Season high 6 targets against the Bears, 5 catches, 50 yards. And then Justin Herbert said afterward that it was, quote, huge to get Quentin Johnston involved. What do you think of the rookie here, Jared?
A step forward, but we'll see where he goes from here. Johnston did set season highs last week in yards per route run and Pro Football Focus receiving grade. I mean, still just a 15% target share, still a route on just 67% of the dropbacks. You did have Josh Palmer playing through that knee injury in that game. You had the great Gerald Everett sitting out that game with his injuries. There was opportunity to be had for Quentin Johnston. I still don't think they're using him right. There's too much deep stuff with him. That's not what he's best at. There was the one play in that game against the Bears where he caught like a short little crosser, made like 2 guys miss and picked up, I think it was, over 10 yards, and most of it coming after the catch. I think they need to do more of that stuff. I looked this up since Mike Williams went down. Quentin Johnston has just 1 screen target. Darius Davis, their other rookie wide receiver, has 5 screen targets. I mean, give some of those to your first round wide receiver. I think that's what he's best at. I'm definitely leaving on the light for Quentin Johnston. I think there's a chance he's a fantasy factor down the stretch here. I still will not want to use him this coming week, especially in a bad matchup against the Jets. But if he was dropped in your league, I definitely think he's still, one of the better wide receiver stashes.
I think he's stashable right now. I think he's not somebody that you have to have. Like if you're in a situation where you're like, who do I cut this week for help? You're not going to lose anything big, I don't expect, by dropping Quentin Johnston for something that you need right now. But he's interesting. I'm curious to see what happens the rest of the way. It's worth saying, though, we were all excited about the OC switch for the Chargers. There's not really evidence so far that Kellen Moore is actually maximizing their offensive pieces, with the current case in point being not using Quentin Johnston to do what he seems to be best at so far. Even if they see long-term potential for him as a downfield guy, if it's not working right now, if it wasn't his strongest point coming out of college, it seems like something to downplay early and just kind of let him get comfy with what he's already good at.
Yeah, I was worried this would happen with Quentin Johnston because he's, tall guy who runs fast. Let's, send him downfield on deep shots. But again, that's just, he can do it, but I don't think that's what he's best at. So we'll see. I mean, hopefully Kellen Moore watches the tape, sees the one nice yards after catch play Johnston made on Sunday night and does more of that going forward.
Yeah, they're all learning each other. Quentin Johnston's learning the league. The OC is probably also learning the best way to use him. So we'll watch. Normally we close this out with a streaming defense pick, but Jared, I think that this week is notable in that there are a lot of defenses that you can make a case for and no single defense that stands out among the group. So check our up-to-date week 9 rankings in the free agent finder to discover which streaming defense makes the most sense for you. There are, like I said, more options this week than there are most weeks. Normally, I feel like I'm, weeding through to try to find one that makes sense. This week, it's tougher to actually whittle them down to make a top one. So put in bids for 5 or 6, take whichever one you get. You don't have to spend much. And if you're wondering how we compare Quentin Johnston and Demario Douglas to the guys that are currently available on your waiver wire, as well as the guys on your roster right now, Free Agent Finder has the answers for all that, synced directly with your team so it knows who you have available, who's on your team. You can sort by this week's projections. You can sort by the rest of season projections, consensus, even matchups for those specific players this week and next week. You got to be a DS Insider to take advantage, but it's worth it, especially if you play in a bunch of leagues, because you can sync them all and cut your waiver time down by a lot. All of it, of course, we put out there, we have at the ready, we keep updated because we want to help you win your season.